My name's Nick with Toro TMS. Toro TMS is a modern software that helps carriers like you simplify or automate their workflows to save you time. So you can spend more time growing your business or with your family. But there's no shortage in folks that are going to stand up here on these stages and talk at you about their products over the weekend. I promise you that's not what this session is about. The purpose of this session is to help those of you who are thinking about growth or are struggling to grow. And I haven't grown a trucking business to 100 trucks, but Denny Wyatt has. And I've been fortunate enough over the past year to get to know Denny, and he's as good of a person as he is a businessman, and he's a damn good businessman. And so I hope you all in this session learned something from him today, as I've learned much from him personally and professionally over the past year. So Denny, thanks for agreeing to do this with us today.
You are welcome. I'm looking forward to it.
So let's maybe start this out. You started out as a truck driver for your dad when you were 19 years old, and now run one of the largest trucking companies on the West Coast, Apex Logistics, over 500 trucks. Can you just tell us a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, my father was a roofer, not a trucker, and his roofing business got to the size that he needed a truck, and so he bought a truck without a driver, and I was the kid that for some reason loved trucks, and so I taught myself to drive it. And so some of you out there that either don't have enough hair or have a lot of gray hair, it was started out in a 1962 auto car with a 5.4 and a 262 Cummins, and where the shutters open and the heat flows through the cab, and that was trucking in 1969. So after I got a little experience and got a little older, I went to work as a driver for a bulk company. In the town I lived in, there was a big cement plant, so there was a need for drivers. It wasn't like it is today. There wasn't a preponderance of driving jobs, so you had to beg your way in. But in the late 70s, it became evident that deregulation was coming in. Prior to that, everything was regulated, what you could haul, where you could haul it, the kind of authority you had to have, and that was all falling apart. And in 1982, they totally deregulated interstate commerce, and following up with that, in 95, they deregulated intrastate commerce for the late states that wouldn't give it up, which were like Texas, Nevada, and California. So as it deregulated, the company I worked for couldn't stand what was happening with deregulation, and they started to go out of business. I went to work for another company and got into the sales end, and deregulation got them, and I went to work for a third company, and after about 5 years, I was in the sales end of the business and was able to sell the freight and work deregulation to our advantage, and we became a deregulation baby, much of the way that the acceleration came from J.B. Hunt, Swift, and those giant companies you see today that replaced the multitude of regulated carriers that preceded them. So we continued to grow from that point, and my education came through hard knocks and learning the hard way, and that's how we got where we're at.
You know, but before we continue, I got to say, when you say sales, maybe you just want to tell a little bit of a funny story about how you used to identify new customers, and when you say sales, what you meant.
Well, of course, back in the early 80s, there wasn't such a thing called the internet. And so your resources to figure out where the customer base was a lot different than today. And a big portion of my business is in the Los Angeles basin. And I used to, in order to figure out, and we're in the bulk business, so we have a specific looking trailer that you haul bulk in. So I would go down at 2 o'clock in the morning and sit next to the freeway and watch the trucks come by. And then when I'd see a bulk truck that similar to what we had, I'd chase it down the freeway and follow them where they went, and then I'd make an address check, and then back up to my crow's nest I'd go for the next one. And I knew that ready mix business started at 6 o'clock in the morning, and the other industrial businesses that use bulk started at 9 o'clock in the morning. So after my research went on, I would then go down in the city and start cold calling all of those companies.
So there you go. If you leave with nothing else today, you have one piece of actionable advice, is to go and follow those trucks to find new customers. Okay, so maybe we can transition for folks that are starting to think about growing their fleet. How do you even begin to start to think about that?
Well, often if you're here today and this is yesterday, then here is tomorrow. And you've got to get yourself down here to tomorrow. And whether you're wanting to be at 60, 80, 100 trucks, or often it just happens to you. You get busy working hard, you do a good job, you have good relationship, and all of a sudden you wake up one morning, turn around, and you've got 60, 70 trucks running down the road. So you've got to look ahead to your future. You've got to decide what you want out of this thing. And so what kind of business are you going to build? Are you building a business for your family? Are you going to pass this on? You have heirs? Or are you building something to sell? Or you just want to make a living? Or like we call them fun truckers, if you want the trucks with all the big chrome and all the stuff over them, are you just trying to make a statement? Then you need to look inward and see how much of your life and what are you willing to invest in this thing for success. There's a lot of different trucking, as all of you know, and some of them, when you look at the LTL, the flatbed carriers, the chemical carriers, brokers, package, reefer, bulk, containers, what business are you in? What business do you want to be in? There's a lot of subsets of these businesses. Maybe geographically, if you're in a metropolitan area, you sometimes can pick one of those and concentrate on it. If you're in a rural area, sometimes you have to be something for everybody. You've got to have a bulk trailer, you got to have a flatbed trailer, you got to have a grain trailer for when the grain's coming, and so you grow your fleet in several different areas, and that's significant. What do you want your footprint to be? So back up one. What do you want your footprint to be? Do you want to stay close to home, have all the children tucked in on Friday night? Do you want to be regional, run 5, 6 states? Do you have a customer demands that? Do you want to be national and just send them trucks out and I'll see you in 3 weeks and don't call me? Or do you want to do international? Export, import, rail yard, Canada, Mexico? It's all possibilities that you need to plug into your formula of what you want. And then what kind of a model, trucking model do you want? Do you want employees, people to deal with every day, ultimate control? Do you want contractors, owner-operators, lease operators? You want a combination of both and throw in the side, I have excess freight, maybe I want to be a broker. All of these things need to be thought out and need to go in your game plan. You need to take that game plan, that written game plan, and it needs to go on the wall of your office, on the windshield of your truck, in anywhere you need to put it, and that needs to be your reference point to keep from being tempted to get off track and go somewhere you didn't intend to go. It's a plan that can always be changed, and you can alter that plan kind of like a business plan would, but you need to know where you are, where you want to go, because those different options dictate that you operate your business in a different way.
That's great. And maybe just more specifically, I think in my experience in talking with folks that are at varying sizes, fleet sizes, it almost seems like there is an evolution that the owners or management teams of these trucking companies have to go through to sort of break through that barrier at, let's call it like the 30 truck level. What sorts of changes are required in terms of mindset, business practices, time allocation to go from 30 trucks to, let's say, 60 plus trucks?
When you're a small operator, and probably single terminal, you know every detail of every piece of equipment and every load that's hauled. You know every one of the drivers personally. If you're running a good business, you know their wives, their children, their birthdays, and as it grows, that becomes less possible. You have several facets of the business. A few of them I've listed here. You need to take a look internally on what you like to do. And because there's that old saying that if you do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And so don't pick the part of the business you hate, because you'll be wanting to jump out the window every day. So take whatever piece of this business that you like doing and tell yourself, that's the piece I want, and then begin the path of delegating these other duties out to responsible people.
And maybe as we just talk about that, let's say someone in the audience is, this message resonates with them and they need to go and make some changes. You and I have talked about, just the importance of you sort of as the owner or the management team coming up with a plan on your own, sort of then implementing that change across your org. But trucking companies can sort of be like cruise ships sometimes, in that it's really hard to turn a cruise ship. And so I'm curious if you could maybe talk through an example where you've sort of implemented change and brought your team along and turned the cruise ship, for lack of a better analogy.
Well, one of the key things that happens is your need for information. When you're a small one-terminal operation, you know everything about everything. As it grows, you start to lose your contact with that. You start to lose your grip on what truck 22's doing or 44's doing or how many hours John has. And so you need to get into some software, some help somewhere to get the information you need. We transitioned, as we grew up beyond 100 trucks, we transitioned out of a small kind of garage-built software in 1993, and we transitioned into a mainframe, large software, and we had to take our 100 truck management team that we had established, we had to get them in a room and we had to get buy-in and get them to understand what was needed to make that transition to continue to grow, because we saw that from our customer base. They desired us to continue to grow. And so we needed to get buy-in from them, but there was there were a few bodies that didn't want to make the change, and there were a few that just did not. They liked the old software, they didn't want more trucks, and there was a few people we had to leave behind, but for the masses and all the future employees, it was the best decision.
Awesome. Let's narrow in on time allocation for a second, because in my interactions with owners over the years, this seems to be one of the most challenging adjustments as fleet size sort of increases. What do you think the key differences are in terms of where time should be spent for someone at the 20, 30 truck level versus someone who has 60, 70, 80, 90 trucks?
My first comment on this topic is this growth thing. You need to make sure you talk with your family about it as well. This is a family decision, and in your effort, in your cause to grow forward, you need to remember your family. That is the most important thing, is the family, to make sure the soccer time, the going hunting, the snowmobiling, that kind of stuff with the family, that's still there. Because I can tell you, you can't advance your company if you're sitting in divorce court. And you can't advance your company if you're bailing your kids out of jail every week. So don't leave the family behind on this thing. Bring the family with you. And beyond that, we have an interesting slide. In this business, you have a propensity to be a fireman. And there's a lot of adrenaline that flows when, you know, a truck isn't getting there on time, or one breaks down, or something happens, and boy, dispatch can't figure out how to do 8 loads with 4 trucks, and oh boy, let me in there, and everybody sits around and waits for this fire, and you get a real high out of it fixing these problems. You're doing the wrong thing if you're fighting fires. And if you recognize or see fires, it becomes your responsibility as the manager, the driver, to recognize that and delegate people into that area and allow them to do their job. The one thing that's toughest for an owner is you see something, you want to jump in there and take care of it. Well, you jump in there and take care of it, that's what you're going to be doing for your whole life, because the people you've delegated it to don't feel they've been delegated. And so they're just going to sit around and wait for the boss to roar in and fix all these things. So you need to delegate stuff, and if you delegate it, you can delegate it down to the level of time management that you want to put in, and use KPIs to monitor the balance of your business.
And just to tie a ribbon on that, you know, you and I have talked about this many times. In that delegation and the KPI sort of framework that you're talking about, it's delegate, but also hold people accountable, and hold people accountable to that KPI. And so there's time that needs to be invested in figuring out what's the KPI that this particular function needs to focus on, so I can hold that person accountable. Could you maybe just talk a little bit about, you know, you having to do that and what that typically looks like?
The KPIs, your key performance indicators, need to exist in every part of your business. And it needs not to be a surprise. Somebody should be able to walk up to anybody in your organization and ask them, what's the key performance indicator for your area? And they should know. Deadhead miles, loaded percentage, fleet velocity, fuel mileage, whatever you've established and that manager is bought in on is what they should be held responsible for, and not for some mystic thing that comes out of left field in the 9th inning.
Yep. And maybe just a fun question while we're on the topic of delegation. Could you maybe talk about a task that you used to spend time on that you've since delegated, and maybe your thought process as to why you got away from that and why you delegated?
Well, as you know, as small fleet operators, you do the hiring, you do the firing, you buy the health insurance, you buy the truck insurance, every facet. You buy the parts for the shop. You go out and turn wrenches. You'll change oil if you need change. You'll jump in that truck and deliver that load if it is around the corner or down the road and it needs to be done. So, as you come up, as I did, you did every facet of the business. And number one, I was quick to get rid of was the HR part. The discipline part, and as the labor laws have changed in the country, and you can't, even if it's a right to work state, you can't walk up to somebody and say, Friday's your last day, here's your check, see you later. Well, why'd you get rid of me? Well, it's a right to work state, you just see you Friday. Well, pretty soon the lawyer contacts you, and then you got to start fighting that battle. And so I hated that part. The insurance that we bought for the company, I went through the whole insurance thing many years and learned about health insurance, learned all the nomenclature for it, truck insurance, and then wound up delegating it out. And so when the risk manager comes to us with the proposal for health insurance and everything in a year, every year, I knew what he was talking about, so we could then make an educated decision on buying health insurance. So I liked the customer relations part, and so I chose to work with the customers, rates and surcharges and all of those issues, and delegated out the other pieces of the business as we grew, and those size of those responsibilities necessitated that.
HR was apparently a buzzword. I saw some head nods from the crowd as soon as you said that. So, I also know from spending time with you at your office that you review your numbers religiously. I mean, people come in and bring him books, and he just instantly in the books looking at numbers. Can you maybe talk about the key metrics that you look at on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, and tell us what those metrics tell you and how you react to them as they move up or down.
Well, as the slide indicates, if you don't have money, you're not going anywhere. And I don't care who you are. And so cash is king. And understanding what cash you have and what obligations you have. And again, as a small business, you can look at your checking account as a small business. Yeah, I'm doing okay. I've got the cash here. As you grow, you have a lot of prepaid expenses that wind up in your financial statements that bring you wonderful surprises on an annual basis. Like, guess what? It's time to license the trucks. Guess what? The insurance deposits due. If you buy insurance annually, we're buying. I can get a better deal if I buy 200 tires at a time. And so where's $40,000 at for tires? So I watch the cash every day. I watch the number of loads we're hauling every day. I get a fuel report of every gallon of fuel we bought during the day. We happen to inventory a lot of fuel because we make a lot of money off of buying fuel right. And our fuel manager, when there's a hurricane that happens in the Gulf, we know what happens to fuel prices. So the fuel manager stocks up on fuel, and we've got 150,000 gallons of fuel in inventory. And so we can work that inventory until the pricing comes back down, and it makes us a few pennies in a penny business.
That's great. Maybe just, we talked about this morning, and it was the thing that I said I wish we would have spent more time planning on, but I think it's important for folks here to hear it. While we're on the metrics topic, you had an important point this morning on bringing your customers along with the metrics that are important to you. And maybe you could just talk about how do you sort of build customer relationships in a way so that you're on the same side of the table as them, and maybe some examples of that.
Well, on the customer issue, in my view, the number one sin is working for brokers 100% of the time. C.H. Robinson is not doing $1.5 billion in net revenue a year by not taking it away from you. So if you have got to have core customers, and then that relationship with core customers is key. And you build that relationship by explaining to those core customers that our costs are your costs. So if you help us control our costs, it will help us control what we charge you for freight. So our examples are drop and pick trailers. We haul 300 loads a day into the Los Angeles basin. And as every one of you can see in the trade magazines, LA Basin has 4 of the 10 worst congested roads in the United States of America. And so the employees will go, they're sitting in gridlock, and velocity, which we watch in the LA Basin, is one of the KPIs that we use for that particular area, is down to 35 miles an hour, is all the trucks can average on the freeways. So our goal is to put those trucks in the basin in the off hours. So we want to deliver from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. and from 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. And so we go to the customers and either drop trailers where a truck can go in at 8 a.m. and unload 5 or 6 trailers at a time in order to facilitate what the customer's needs are, or they can go in at night, drop a loaded, pick up an empty, or you get the customer to accept the loads on a 24-hour basis. We work with the customers on monitoring their inventory, and we want to know what their inventory is so we know when to send them freight. And so that helps us understand them, and we can send that freight in when there's room in their silos or their warehouses to take what we're bringing them. And generally speaking, that relationship builds a long-term relationship with that customer so that you're insulated from the guy that doesn't know his costs that wants to come in and undercut you, and it's not simply a price market.
And then now that we're talking about metrics externally, could you maybe talk about how you communicate metrics internally with the team to keep them aligned? Because I think there's always a bit of a hesitation on who sees what and how much detail in the business. And so how do you walk that tightrope?
We share our information freely amongst all the managers. We have a senior management team that includes the obvious areas of the shop and sales and accounting and IT, operations, and we include all those people. But even further than that, we drive that information right down to the order planner that's talking to the driver. And we do that with this is a monthly statement that we produce every month, and it is required to be out by accounting on the 20th of the month following. And this has a breakdown of each and every one of our 8 terminals, and we have 12 divisions in the 8 terminals, and we have divided up our company by like-kind business. I think this is critically important. If you're in an area where you're doing flatbeds and tankers and van freight, you've got to divide that up so you know what the van division's doing, what the bulk division's doing, what the flatbed division is doing, and then you can use a statement, a financial statement for each one of those divisions to figure out if that thing's making money or not, and then you can dive into the area that needs your attention. I like to make the comparison that we have 500 7-Eleven stores. Now, you know darn good and well every one of those stores isn't making $1.50 a month. Some of them are doing really, really good, and some of them literally suck. So your job is now to figure out through numbers where the winners are and where the losers are, why they're losing, why they're winning, and duplicate this and cast this off, fix it, go to the customer, you have all the confidence in the world, I need 10% because this is a mess, and if he takes it away from you, you've benefited from it, and you've got money that drops to the bottom line by virtue of getting rid of his business and instead of making it right.
I apologize a little bit for putting you on the spot here, but could you maybe give an example of a time, maybe recently or in the last few years, that you noticed a metric moving in the wrong direction, and sort of what did you have to do to figure out the insight to understand what was going on there, and then how did you sort of take action on it?
Well, in the bulk business, you generally load on a scale, and so you generally load to 80,000 pounds. And so we recognized one of the customers that one of the matrix we always watch, it shows up in every load screen rather than the net weight hauled by the truck, what the gross weight was. And it's one of the KPIs that the divisional managers watch, and it better be 79.7 to 79.980, or else there's some questions. Well, we noticed a sand account we hauled out of, it had dropped to 77,000. And so within a couple weeks, we reached out to the sand customer and said, what's going on? Oh, well, our scale broke down, and we can't get a scale guy out here to fix it. And so we said, can we help? And well, certainly. And so we called our scale contacts, and they went out to the customer and fixed their scale within 12 hours, and we were back at 79.9 trucking.
Awesome. Okay, so I know this is a topic that you're pretty passionate about, especially with you also previously being the president of the California Trucking Association. The ever-changing regulatory environment is top of mind for most people in the industry. Can you speak to how you have approached business planning to protect yourself from the changing regulatory landscape, and what should folks in this room be doing to best position themselves to deal with changes in regulations?
My recognition is mostly people say they're too busy, and they pull the blanket over their head, so to speak, and just work real hard. And in California, which I know is a nasty word, and I hate using it back here in the East where people are so full of heart and wonderful, but you know, California has 232 agencies in the state government, and a whole bunch of them want to come see you. And then they have a full-time, California has a full-time legislature, and they put in 3,200 bills every year. And it runs the gamut, from throwing owner-operators out to not allowing you to pay piecework for drivers. And I'm really passionate about this. You've got to be involved up front, and that means joining a trade organization, whether it's the Kentucky Trucking Association or the one in your state. Nevada is a fairly small state relative to the number of truckers. They have an excellent vice president of their trucking association, and he does conference calls once a week and goes over the regulatory issues that are confronting Nevada. He goes over, has the highway patrol on, he has the DOT on. They talk about closures, what's going on, that they're going to have a brake inspection parade for the next 3 weeks, and this is all information you need to have. On the federal level, as you're all aware, these guys are trying to shove these electric trucks down our throat, and the timing, and there's mandates, like they had mandates for the '07 trucks, the 2011 trucks. You have to be aware of when that's coming, because it's a gigantic mistake to go buy a used '09 truck when in the fourth quarter of 2010, when the 2011 mandate is you have to have SCR. So you've got to know these things are coming, and you can plan accordingly and lay it out accordingly. Plus, it is our responsibility to educate our customers. When you get with our customers, it's, oh boy, this is coming, they want these electric trucks, I can only do this, the trucks are going to be $400,000, I don't know if I have an extension cord long enough to reach your dock. And so if you know all that, you can begin the process with your customer, so when the day comes that they have finally shoved a $400,000 tractor down your throat, and you go to the customer, yeah, I know. I even, when key important articles show up in the trade magazines or come from the American Trucking Association, my state associations, I will peel those articles out and I'll email them to the traffic managers that I deal with, just to help educate them. No surprises.
Just speaking about some of the things there, it just it makes me think about the future, and I'm curious, like, what concerns overall, and maybe it's regulation specific, maybe it's outside, sort of concern you about the future? What are top of mind for you today, and what should folks be thinking about as they think about this next decade?
Well, there's about 3 million trucks in the United States of America, 3.3 million drivers. The average size of a trucking company is 5 trucks in America. Now, when you think about the Swifts that have 22,000 trucks, and U.S. Express, Schneider, these guys, that math tells you real quick that what's predominant in this country is the owner-operator. And these politicians are after the owner-operator. They have got the unions in their ear, and the unions are telling them these guys aren't treated fair, it isn't really what they want to do, they really want to work for somebody. And so California has started it with their infamous AB 5. Some of the other states are following. It is, and as they always say, the prevailing winds blow east out of California. And so we have got to be knowledgeable of this. We've got to keep our ear to the ground. And as it comes up, you've got to know your politician. It sounds kind of corny, but it is really basic to find out who your state legislator is, who your federal senator is, your federal congressman, and you know what? They put their pants on just like the rest of us. And to make an appointment when they're going to be in their office at your house, go see them and get to know them. And they have all kinds of campaign stuff. They'll always be hitting you up for money, but you don't have to give it to them. But you have to show up and tell them, I want to be your transportation expert. When they have 3,000 bills coming at them in a legislative session, then they just give it to their staff. Hey, staff, read this, tell me what I should do. Or if it's a big important thing, then the head of their caucus will tell them what to do. You need to be there to counter it when necessary. I'm a working man, I have employees, I'm pumping money into this economy, and this is what's affecting me. And letters, emails, there's a million ways to communicate with them now, but getting in front of them and telling them your story and bringing your high school son with you, bringing your grandchildren with you. This is my family, this is what feeds my family, and you guys need to do what I want, not what some union or other special interest wants.
Okay, moving a little more into some of the personal stuff. I know many of your lessons have been learned the hard way. If you had the opportunity to visit with your younger self, what would you tell him that would save him a lot of pain that you've gone through, business building, et cetera?
Well, I think, in my opinion, the accounting end was the toughest thing. I'm pretty good at math, but this accounting thing really caught me off guard. And as the company grew, we depended a lot on outside hire for our accounting clerks, and we ultimately projected we wanted to sell the company, so we did audited financials, and that's totally different than reviewed financials. And understanding depreciation and the effect it has on your company and what other effects cash have. There were several times in the past 40 years, mostly early on, thank goodness, that I had to call the truck finance people and say, I got to skip a couple months. I can't make the payments. And so put it either, you got two choices, come and get the trucks or roll the payments on the backside and rewrite the notes. And most of the time they were, well, all of the time, I've never had a truck repossessed, but all of the time, okay. And so they'd roll it on the backside, give you a couple months skip, and charge the hell out of you for rewriting the note, and on you go, and you work your way out of it. So the accounting was the very most difficult part that I had to learn in the School of Hard Knocks.
And you hit on it a little bit there, and I know we've talked about this, is just you place a heavy emphasis on building relationships, not just with your customers, but with your vendors, suppliers, et cetera. Could you just maybe, and you talked a little bit about it right there, could you maybe just talk about the importance of that and how you sort of go about that and maybe how it's helped you over the years?
Doing what you say you're going to do is critically important. If I know every vendor wants to be paid cash the minute they bring the clutch into the shop, but you can usually pry 30 days out of them. But if you make a 60-day promise, a 30-day promise, I'll pay you next Friday, do it. Or you make the phone call to say, I can't get it to you Friday, it's got to be Tuesday. If you have a relationship with your vendors, and you should have, that is as important as the one is with your customers. That includes your banker. You go see your banker, have lunch with your banker, and with your vendors, always in the good times, make a list of these important people that you give the most money to, meet them, greet them, know who they are, and then if you have an issue, you can call Joe, say, Joe, this is what's going on, and you'll get the help you need. Or if you have a truck stuck in Albuquerque and you're based in Cincinnati, you can call Joe, and Joe can call Albuquerque and get you in when that shop said, oh, it'll be 3 weeks. And we've all heard that. Oh, yeah, we're so busy, it'll be 3 weeks before I get a tech on it. That doesn't get it done. So those relationships are absolutely critical, and doing what you say you're going to do.
Just so we have it on record, that means be nice to your software sales guys too. So okay, so we have about 5 minutes left. So rapid fire questions. What is one metric that everyone in the audience should start tracking come Monday, if they're not already?
Cash flow. No cash flow. Whenever you do payroll, whenever you do payables, we set up a weekly sheet. I get every single Monday morning. It's got what the receivables are, outstanding, 0 to 30, 30, 45, 45, 60. Beyond that, what the payables are, 0 to 30, 45 down. Key payments that were made this week, $250,000 to fuel, $400,000 to driver payroll, $800,000 to owner-operators, and those key items that are in there. We have an operating line of credit. I want to know where that operating line of credit is and how much we've borrowed against it and how much is left in reserve based on the receivables. One sheet of paper, and then I get from the fuel people, I get a fuel report of the number of gallons of fuel we bought last week, average price for fuel. The accounting statement has what the average fuel surcharge was for last week. We've been very diligent. Fuel surcharge been around 20 years now, believe it or not. And we have, out of my 500 customers, I have one customer that has the fuel rolled into the rate that I have to talk to anytime it goes up or down. Everybody else is on an automatic schedule. And so fuel is handled in that manner.
What is one activity that all trucking owners should spend less time on? What about the inverse of that? What about more time?
You want more time or less time?
I want both. Less time first.
Spend less time fighting fires. If you have to fight a fire, go back to your safe place where it's nice and quiet and figure out why it happened and what can I do to mitigate it and fix it so it's minimized and doesn't come up again.
All right, now more time.
And you got to spend more time doing what you like. If you like driving truck, which I always loved driving truck, even though it was 2 boxes with no air conditioner, and I got to move to a transmission. I love to drive truck, and up until a few years ago, when you have 500 employees, you ought to see the eyes fall out of their head when I pull in with a load on the truck right in behind them and go to unload it, and they're like, "What the hell are you doing here?" I says, "Well, nothing else to do, so I thought I'd pull a load." So needed the cash flow. So.
Okay, very, very, very important question. Do you think Nicolas Cage is a good actor or a bad actor?
I think Nicolas Cage is a pretty good actor. He's done some dumb stuff, but I enjoy watching his action films.
I agree with you. The Toro team is about 50-50 split on this, so I had to ask it to get the tie break. What is one process or rule that every trucking owner in this crowd can implement next week that could produce positive results?
Well, I say your business plan, setting up who you are, what you are, you need to do that in your quiet place right away. Set up your KPIs, get your management group together. I hate it when they want to meet between 8 and 5 because that's when the customers want to call. So sometimes it's, let's meet at Jerry's coffee shop at 5 a.m. I'll buy breakfast. Let's sit down, kick it around. But everybody in your organization needs to know your dream. Whatever that dream is, they need to know it. And they'll all get on the same end of the rope with you and pull. If you visualize or see somebody on the other end of that rope, they need to be worked with. You need to understand the vision. Nobody, you have to remember, even the driver, all the way through your organization, nobody gets up in the morning and says, watch this, I'm going to go screw this company all up. They all go to work with good intentions. And if something isn't happening right, you better go find a mirror, because probably they don't know the dream, they don't know the direction. And if you don't tell them, they're going to do what they think is best. And often that doesn't line up with your ideals.
I think that's a fantastic way to wrap up. First off, thanks to Denny and his beautiful wife, Sally, for coming out and spending time with us. For those of you that are interested in meeting Denny after this, I know we don't really have time for Q&A. We're having an open bar at booth 67229 in the West Wing. Denny, Sally will be there to hang out and sort of meet you guys and answer questions. And then he'll be around a little bit tomorrow at our booth as well. So I hope you all swing by and meet Denny. And if you're generous enough, throw me a pity hello too. That would be great. Thanks for your guys' time.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.